Hey everybody, Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic here, and it is Sunday, so we are doing Breaches of the Week. And as always, it's another crazy week, and I'd like to thank the following people that sent me some kind of information or linked me, tagged me, whatever it was. And if you have a breach for me, please send it my way, and I'm happy to give you a shout out here and also on my nationally syndicated radio show. And with that, thank you very much, David Walker, Jason Dance, Barrett Peterson, and Jacqueline Wolf. It is always appreciated. And with that, let's start in Italy. We are talking about a multinational firm that's headquartered in Germany but has factories in Italy, and they are unnamed. Apparently, a ransomware incident earlier this year temporarily shut down production for 2 days at their manufacturing facilities in Italy. Now, the attackers disguised a strain of ransomware called Kring as basically the victim's organization's antivirus product, meaning they made it look like the antivirus for the organization that got in, and then they encrypted the servers, and that was obviously a huge problem. Basically, the attackers catered their hacking tools to the victim's infrastructure, which means they probably got in, had persistence, and were able essentially to masquerade as their legitimate antivirus. That is sophisticated, and here we are. Hopefully they are back on their feet and they've excised that virus. Moving on, let's talk about Park Mobile. This is a mobile parking app that's popular in North America, and someone is selling account information for 21 million customers of Park Mobile, according to Brian Krebs, who reported on this. Basically, the stolen data includes customer email addresses, dates of birth, phone numbers, license plate numbers, hashed passwords, and mailing addresses. And asked about this, the Atlanta-based Park Mobile said that the company published a notification on March 26 about a cybersecurity incident linked to a vulnerability in a third-party software that they use. So we'll see where that goes, but heads up, Park Mobile users. Moving on, we have to talk about a cheese shortage in the Netherlands. That's right, Dutch supermarkets have a cheese shortage thanks to a ransomware attack against air-conditioned warehousing and transportation provider Bakker Logistiek. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I apologize. And by virtue of that, essentially, you can't get cheese in the Netherlands right now. Now, Baker, I'm just going to call him Baker, suffered a ransomware attack that encrypted devices on their network and disrupted food transportation and fulfillment operations. And to quote Director Toon Verhoeven, talking to Dutch News, we could no longer receive orders from customers. And in our warehouses, we no longer knew where products were. They are very large warehouses. You don't just go looking for a pallet. We also couldn't plan our transports anymore. We have hundreds of trucks, which was not done by hand either. And so that's really interesting. They couldn't find what cheese went where, and so the cheese keeps sitting in the warehouse. So hopefully the Netherlands will get their cheese back soon, but all the more important that we defend against ransomware. Moving on, let's do an update on Capcom. This is the gaming giant. If you recall, they had a cyber attack last November, and an update on basically on their blog summarizing the results of their investigation. Capcom said that its internal systems are now near to completely restored. That's a long time. Obviously, Capcom is massive. Now, the attack had encrypted data on Capcom devices and installed a message demanding Capcom contact the hacking group that is responsible to pay a ransom. Basically, as for how this attack happened, Capcom explained that unauthorized access to the company's internal network happened in October of 2020 through an old backup VPN at Capcom USA. Now, it seems that the COVID-19 pandemic had a hand in creating conditions for the attack. Basically, Capcom had already started switching to newer VPN devices, but this one was still running. And here we are. So this is all the more reason why we have to make sure we're updating our stuff. Moving on, let's talk about the Hillsborough, New Jersey school system. A cyber attack shut down the entire township school system this past Monday, with local and federal investigators working to figure out what happened here and if any damage had been caused and all of that. Classes were conducted on a virtual basis Tuesday with staff and students using remote devices. Obviously, students, parents, and staff were advised the same procedure will be followed this past Wednesday. All classes have been virtual, and so hopefully Hillsborough, New Jersey will get back on their feet, but there you go. Moving on, let's talk about risk and compliance startup LogicGate. Now, unless you're a customer, you probably didn't hear about this, and this is why you watch or listen to this on every Sunday, because I find these and I go searching. An email sent by LogicGate to customers earlier this month said on February 23rd that an unauthorized third party obtained credentials to its Amazon Web Services hosted cloud platform. Basically, they got in this manner. So they have a flagship product called Risk Cloud, and that helps companies to identify and manage their risk and compliance with data protection and security standards. And LogicGate said that its Risk Cloud can also help find security vulnerabilities before they were exploited by malicious hackers. But here we are. The credentials they got, quote, appear to have been used by an unauthorized third party to decrypt particular files stored in AWS S3 buckets in the LogicGate Risk Cloud backup environment. Only data uploaded to your Risk Cloud environment on or prior to February 23rd of 2021 would have been included in that backup file. Further, to the extent you have stored attachments in the Risk Cloud, we did not identify decrypt events associated with such attachments. So we'll see where that goes, but they were basically able to get in at a very high level thanks to stolen credentials and start accessing people's risk and compliance information, which potentially builds a roadmap into that company. So if you're following a cybersecurity framework like NIST, for example, NIST 800, you're going to see, oh, well, they have 50% of this not done. This is the way to exploit that network. That's obviously a huge problem. And so hopefully that's locked down. LogicGate, good luck. Moving on. Let's talk about the NBA team, the Houston Rockets. They're investigating a cyber attack that attempted to install ransomware onto the basketball team's internal systems, and the organization is working closely with the FBI at the moment to get this sorted out. Quote, the Rockets organization recently detected suspicious activity on certain systems in its internal network. We immediately launched an investigation. Our internal security tools prevented the ransomware from being installed, except for a few systems that have not impacted our operation. So hopefully nobody will be affected. Employees, players, fans, whatever that is. Heads up. Good luck, Houston Rockets. Moving on, let's talk about the cryptocurrency rewards platform, Celsius Network. Now, they disclosed a security breach exposing customer information that actually led to a phishing attack. Now, their CEO stated that Celsius's third-party marketing server was compromised and threat actors had gained access to a partial customer list. After gaining access to this list, the threat actors impersonated Celsius Networks in phishing texts and emails that were basically promoting a new Celsius web wallet. As an incentive to get people to visit the site, the text stated that Celsius was offering $500 US in their CEL cryptocurrency if they create a wallet and enter a special promo code. Clicking or tapping on that link sent them to a phishing site, CelsiusWallets.network, which is now down, and that asked visitors to create this wallet. When you attempted to create a fake wallet, the site would ask visitors to link their other online wallets and input those wallet seed phrases, and once that was provided, the threat actors could simply import your wallet and steal your cryptocurrency. So heads up to you. If you use Celsius Network, they do not have a new web wallet. You might want to check in on their legitimate website and figure out what's going on. And if you've linked those kinds of things or other wallets to this, make sure you're unlinking them and changing those passwords and those seed words. So that is a very important thing. Moving on. Let's talk about the University of Hertfordshire. I believe that is out of the UK, very UK sounding. They got hit by a cyber attack that took down their entire IT network and also blocked access to cloud-based services for their employees and students. The attack, which began just before 10 p.m. on this past Wednesday, took down the Wi-Fi network, student record portal, and email system. Students have also been reporting that they're unable to access the Office 365 services, including platforms like Microsoft Teams, as well as Canvas and Zoom. Obviously not Microsoft products, but heads up to you. Hopefully the University of Hertfordshire will get right back to it. Moving on. Let's stay in the UK and talk about the Swinburne University of Technology, because they confirmed a personal information on staff, students, and external parties had inadvertently made itself public. Now, it said it was advised last month that the information of around 5,200 Swinburne staff and 100 Swinburne students was available essentially publicly on the internet. I have no more information than that, but obviously as that comes to light, I will let you know about the Swinburne University of Technology. Moving on, let's talk about a software company called CodeCove. That's CodeCov. They sell a tool that lets developers measure the testing coverage of their code base. They disclose that they suffered a data breach. In particular, the attackers exploited a bug in the company's Docker image creation to gain access to a bash uploader script designed to map out development environments and report back to the company. This modification that they made quietly called out for user credentials that could have been used to access and exfiltrate data from users' continuous integration environment. So if you use CodeCove, COV, you might want to check in, because essentially you may have a script in your instance that is looking for your usernames and passwords. That's obviously a very serious problem. Heads up. Moving on, let's talk about Washington, D.C.'s Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood of Metropolitan Washington, D.C. this past Friday revealed that it had a breach of patient information from last fall. Now, in a notice advising basically on their website, the organization revealed that it found unusual activity on its networks on September 3rd, and at that time it began securing its systems. It started an investigation, and notified law enforcement. Leaked information includes names, addresses, dates of birth, diagnosis, treatments, and prescription information. Social Security and financial information was also included in the breach. Now, Joshua Spicer, who is the director of communications for this particular Planned Parenthood, said that the breach affected a limited number of patients but did not provide a specific figure on how many. And obviously, given that Planned Parenthood offers things like abortions, this could be particularly sensitive to those women who underwent that procedure and now are possibly exposed or got dumped into the dark web. Hopefully, nothing will come from this, but we shall see. Moving on. Let's talk about 100 million IoT devices that have been exposed. Over the last few years, researchers have found, obviously, and I've talked about a ton of these, a shocking number of vulnerabilities, in basic code that essentially runs a lot of IoT devices. Now, a new set of 9 such vulnerabilities are exposing an estimated 100 million IoT devices worldwide, including basically internet IoT products, IT management servers, and other things as well. The larger question researchers are basically trying to figure out, though, is how to essentially spur substantive changes and implement effective defenses as more and more types of these vulnerabilities are brought to light. IoT is a huge problem. Now, the one that we're talking about here is codenamed basically REC, or name::REC. It's a newly discovered flaw in 4 TCP/IP, or Transmission Control Protocol, Internet Protocol. That's essentially the protocol that runs the internet. It found it in TCP/IP stacks, and this is code that integrates network communication protocols to establish connections between those devices and the internet. The vulnerabilities are present in open source products like FreeBSD, as well as NucleusNet, which is from the industrial control firm Siemens. And basically all of these relate on how this stack basically implements DNS, or domain name system, which is essentially the way that you take that IP address and put a name to it. So if you go to google.com, it's actually a block of 4 numbers if you're talking about IPv4. Now, basically, I say all of this to say that this would allow an attacker to either crash a device, take it offline, or gain control of it. And basically what this is doing is really underscoring the need that for better IoT development standards, but we also need to make sure that we can update or patch our IoT devices regularly. It's basically not as easy to patch these things as an automatic update. Windows prompts you or just does it at the worst time. Windows 10 or your MacBook or even your Android or your iPhone prompts and says, hey, you've got an update, please update to the new iOS or the new Android and all of that. But IoT is a different animal, and a lot of these things, we set it and we forget it, and vulnerabilities crop up over and over and over. I recently had a conversation with Doug DeMuro, the car guy, about this happening in cars, that luxury cars outside of Tesla, and hopefully Tesla started something new with this. You'd have a car for 5 years, brand new and 5 years old, and they would never update the Bluetooth in it, and now your car is very easily hackable. So this is a problem worldwide, and hopefully we will get rid of name REC very quickly as everybody updates. Moving on. let's talk about Bricker and Eckler. This is a law firm out of Ohio. There was a ransomware attack on their email server, and we know this because TriHealth in Cincinnati just declared a data breach. Now, TriHealth says it has to provide essential and confidential information to Bricker and Eckler as part of the business operations, because obviously they're outsourcing to this law firm. And TriHealth said it's not aware that any information was used, that was stolen, etc. But it's not clear how many people were impacted just yet. And Bricker and Eckler is mailing patients and staff affected by the data breach. It's also offering its default 12 months of identity theft and credit monitoring. That's just par for the course. So with that heads up, if you use TriHealth in Ohio, or you have anything to do with Bricker and Eckler, also in Ohio. Moving on, let's talk about Huntington Park City, California. This is interesting. Almost every member of their city's finance department has been placed on leave, and one has now been placed under arrest following a probe into a recent data breach. Now, the city of Huntington Park launched an investigation after becoming aware of a, quote, large-scale security breach of electronic financial records at Huntington Park City Hall that was intercepted and contained by staff in basically in the city's IT department. Now, personal information belonging to Huntington Park City residents is not believed to have been compromised, according to city officials. However, the city did say the investigation is ongoing, and so we will see if that changes. As reported by the LA Times, a statement issued by the city on April 14th said that the data breach had triggered a criminal investigation by the police department of Huntington Park, and on April 8th, basically, the police department arrested a 48-year-old city employee and then charged him with carrying out a felony in connection with the data breach. Now, Los Cerritos reports that the city's budget analyst, Teresa Garcia, was arrested and booked into Los Angeles County Jail on April 8th on suspicion of identity theft and unauthorized computer access. Garcia, who had worked for the department for over a decade, is due to appear in court on August 9th, and this past Monday, 5 other finance department employees were escorted from City Hall by police and placed on leave. This obviously is leading to the closure of that particular department between Monday and Tuesday. The city mayor, Graciela Ortiz, confirmed that an arrest had been made and said that the data had impacted confidential information belonging to an employee. So we will see where this goes, but understand, if you are getting into records you shouldn't and they are sensitive, you can be fired, fined, arrested, or worse. So we will see what happens there, but obviously that's a huge thing. Moving on. Let me give you guys an update on MedData. If you recall, I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago, MedData declared a breach, and now by virtue of it, healthcare networks are declaring breaches that were using MedData. And this week we have a new one, and that is OSF Healthcare out of Peoria, Illinois. I don't know how many people were affected, but heads up, Peoria, Illinois residents, if you use OSF Healthcare. Moving on, let's talk about Residential Mortgage Company. That is actually the name of the company. This is an update. In early March, the New York State Department of Financial Services, or DFS, entered into a consent order requiring Residential Mortgage Company to pay $1.5 million for failing to comply with cybersecurity regulations. I don't know much more about that. This was the formal Department of Justice release on that. I'm also not sure if victims are getting compensation out of this one, but if they are, you may be entitled to compensation. Moving on, we're going to do our finalies here because I've got 2 or 3 finalies that I think are really important. The first one is actually a Christian crowdfunding site known as Give, Send, Go. I'd never heard of them until this incident. And for the record, I usually don't dive into politics, but this data breach has some possibly serious political repercussions. So regardless of your political beliefs, this data breach is news, and it is news for me on Breaches of the Week here. And here are the facts as it goes. Again, I don't care about your political affiliation. This is what happened. A data breach of a Christian crowdfunding site revealed that public officials and police officers were donating to Kyle Rittenhouse. He is a teenager from Illinois that is facing charges for shooting protesters demonstrating basically for the Jacob Blake situation last year in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Now, Rittenhouse is accused of firing his weapon into a crowd of protesters and killing 2 individuals. Following charges that were filed against Rittenhouse after his extradition from Illinois to Wisconsin, charges obviously in the county that Kenosha is in Wisconsin, a Give, Send, Go page for this teenager raised $585,000 for him. This exceeded their $500,000 goal. Now, here's where this gets interesting. A WikiLeaks type group, and I've talked about them before, known as Distributed Denial of Secrets, revealed that several donors and email addresses traceable to public and police officials were present in essentially this donation list. Now, the news publication The Guardian noted that donors attempted to conceal their identity by donating with GiveSendGo's anonymity feature, but identifying details about them were preserved. And here we are. In other words, you mark yourself as anonymous with donation. You can do that, I know, in other places like GoFundMe or whatever, just as anonymous donation to whatever cause or whatever that is. But you got to log in. And so what ends up happening here is these attackers got into the back end of GiveSendGo, which would have the anonymous donors' ID information, such as email addresses and other internal info they gave when they signed up. And so the public sees you as anonymous, but the database that you logged into knows your email address and other things. Now, I'm not going to mention public official names or police departments that are caught up into this, but apparently there are now calls for these officials to be at least investigated or terminated and something like that. But those are the facts on the ground as we know it. You can make up your own mind on both the Kyle Rittenhouse situation itself and now this data breach that is exposing his legal defense donors. And that's basically what's going on. And so obviously that's a very hot button political issue here in the United States. And with that, we will move on. You can make your own choices. The next one we're going to be talking about is human error, because there's a really interesting report that really underscores the problem that we have with this, because human error was blamed for the majority of 149 data breaches at Ireland's Revenue Department. This is Ireland's version of the US's IRS. Now, Revenue said the majority of the breaches were caused by human error, and the volume of such incidents basically had been low given the volume of data that it deals with, meaning 149 data breaches for Ireland Revenue is pretty good because they're dealing with millions and millions of Irish citizens. Now, a detailed log of the incidents reveals a significant chunk of the incidents are related to COVID-19 support payments issued by the Irish government. Now, there were 26 cases where a compliance check letter was not sent to a company with an incorrect, or rather was a compliance check was sent to a company with an incorrect list of employees, meaning they mixed up the list. There were 26 cases of that. Another 7 cases were recorded when a compliance letter was sent to the wrong tax agent. Another one-off incident included one where taxpayers' medical receipts were sent to the wrong person, and a breach where an email about a taxpayer's audit was attached to a, quote, unconnected third party's correspondence. Meaning human error, as mentioned. Also logged was a case where a financial tax demand was sent to a taxpayer's ex-wife's address. Obviously, not a good thing to have your ex get insight into your finances. And another one involving a final demand issued to the an incorrect person of the same name. Meaning, if, let's say, I'm getting a final tax demand and another Nick Espinoza gets it, and I know there are others out there that have my name, here we go. They're obviously not on the hook for paying that, nor should they see what's going on with my finances or me seeing what's going on with theirs. In another breach, a revenue official received her ex-husband's information due to a system error, according to the log that they have. Now, this is a combination, I think, of having processes and policies that are more loose than they should be for the data handling, but it also shows a lack of training and policy enforcement as well. If you can get those two core things in place, then the human error rate goes way down. But because we're dealing with humans, we'll never fully get rid of that. I wouldn't expect them to go from 149 human error breaches to 0, but if they're really on it, maybe they can cut that down by 75, 80%. And honestly, that's pretty good because we get absent-minded, we get distracted, we, see Nick Espinoza here and Nick Espinoza there, and then we attach the wrong thing to the wrong guy. I mean, these things happen. The goal is to have systems of checks in place to make sure that you're catching those mistakes to lower that error rate. So we'll see where that goes. But I thought that was pretty interesting. And finally, we are going to be talking about Facebook yet again? Are you exhausted with the amount of data breaches they have and their stock price continuing to go up? Now, cyber criminals have taken out a number of Facebook ads masquerading as the Clubhouse app. That is the new social media that is the audio only. Basically, they were taking out ads masquerading as a Clubhouse app for PC users in order to target unsuspecting victims with malware. If you don't know, Clubhouse is only available on the iPhone. No PC, no Android, nothing else. Now, TechCrunch, who is reporting on this, was alerted this past Wednesday to Facebook ads tied to several Facebook pages impersonating Clubhouse, and basically clicking on an ad would open a fake Clubhouse website, including a mocked-up screenshot of what the non-existent PC app looks like, with a download link to the malicious application. And when you opened it, this infection tries to communicate with a command and control server to obtain instructions on what to do next. Essentially, it establishes a persistence, phones home, and says, what do you want me to do? One sandbox analysis of this basically showed that the malicious app tried to infect the isolated machine with ransomware. But overnight, the fake Clubhouse websites, which were hosted in Russia, went offline, and in doing so, the malware also stopped working. According to Gardaco's Armit Serper, who was interviewed by TechCrunch and tested the malware in a sandbox this past Thursday, said the malware received an error from the server and then did nothing more. Now, each of the Facebook pages impersonating Clubhouse only had a handful of likes, fortunately, but they were still active at the time that TechCrunch actually published the article that I am cribbing from. When reached, Facebook wouldn't say how many account owners had clicked on the ads pointing to these fake and malicious sites. At least 9 ads were placed this past week between Tuesday and Thursday. Several of these ads said Clubhouse is, quote, now available for PC, while another featured a photo of the co-founders Paul Davidson and Rohan Seth. Clubhouse did not return TechCrunch's request for comment. Now, I personally took a look at the ads, and they're actually rather convincing. Solid English, no real errors, good logo structure and design reproduction and all of that. So these would look legit, and if you didn't know what you were looking at, you would essentially believe, yeah, this is legit. They now have Clubhouse for PC. Woohoo. Facebook basically didn't check to see if these ads were actually linked to the corporate entity Clubhouse. And that's part of the problem that we have here. When we see these fake ads, oftentimes companies or organizations register into Facebook. I have an official public page. You might be watching or listening to this through my Facebook page. And anybody could spin up another fake Nick Espinosa, put my name or my logo or, anything, my picture on there, and basically masquerade as me saying horrible, horrible things. Because Facebook really doesn't have a way to say, well, wait a second, we've got a Nick Espinosa with this face, with all of this kind of stuff, registered into this account, and now here we are. While they've been very, very reactive on things, what this shows is a lack of proactive policies, essentially to identify fraud, in that way. And we've heard a lot of accounts personally of people saying, well, somebody just spun up a fake account of mine. Maybe it's a disgruntled ex that you've got, or somebody trying to mess with you. I've also heard about this on Relatives, where they will spin up fake accounts and then get their relatives to other relatives to connect to this. I mean, this is a problem that we have. And so I hope you weren't hit by this. Facebook is obviously has these problems. Clubhouse, though, is only on the iPhone. And so if anybody's offering you Android, which they say they are working on and coming out soon, or PC or even MacBook, what they're saying is no, it's iPhone only right now. So stick with that. But here we have a situation that could have been avoided through a simple check system by Facebook that's possibly getting people data breached, infected, ransomed, whatever that is. That's a huge problem. Facebook needs to step up their game. And those were your breaches of the week. Were you affected? Let me know. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP. And please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe and stay online. Thanks, everyone.